at Politicon in Los Angeles doing a special episode of My Peoples. We just had our very first season that we wrapped last week, and we're very excited to bring you a very special panel here at Politicon, Disrupting the System. First off, we just want to say that we started My Peoples because we recognized that it was very important for the revolution to be televised. We've got some amazing people here who've been doing quite a lot in that regards to make that possible. But first off, we're going to start with an amazing poet and a beautiful piece of music that's going to go along with that. Please welcome to the stage Mustafa Ahmed, who is going to be performing with Angelica Rudd.
How you guys feeling? I need more energy, man. I need more energy. How you guys feeling? Thank you, man. Thank you. I just met her about 5 minutes ago, so this is all alchemy right here. This is all about merging two different cultures, two different worlds of music. So yeah, without further ado, man.
Oh, leave me alone. I can go back. I'm still finding myself inside your cries. Leave me alone. Oh, while I stand here bleeding, I don't need your reasons to be. Oh, leave me alone. Oh, I'm falling down, trying to hold on my reasons. Oh, I'm leaving myself. Oh, leave me alone. Oh, oh, leave me alone. Oh.
I know young kids that can teach you how to mourn, how to trust the God you never seen, how to trust the air when it's hard to breathe, that'll tell you when to leave the funeral when it's over. Young kids who will hold you with broken arms as you grieve, whose hearts broke 1,000,000 times but still manage to believe that it's still together in their chest, beating and free. Oh, so many children that know death better than we do, whose imaginary friends found a way to disappear too. You can't teach them how to love with the heart you never carried, with bodies you never buried. They play with the soil that people use as their blankets, find sadness lurking during weddings and birthdays. Young kids who've outgrown any child play, who can't afford to wear their smiles some days, but the days they do, they light up proving their love, and their love falls on skin like tattoos. And though they learn of darkness too soon, they still laugh when their mother turns off the light and pretends to be a monster in their room. Though they know real ones exist too. Real ones exist too. And etched on our hands are these scars. No matter how untouched, our perfection is flawed. The hurt of this world is remembered on our palms. Still I use them to hold my dreams, as fragile as they are. Still I use them to hold. And when we enter this world, I don't believe we cry because it's cold, but because hearts have turned cold. And so we begin to fear for our own. But we quickly learn about those whose left hands have veins that stretch to those left behind, who silence our cries, their beating hearts that are reborn each time they look to our eyes. They wrap us with blankets that will turn evils away, and the sorrow falls down our faces like liquid, for we are holding the breaths of today. Etched on our hands are the maps of our homelands. We are nomads that found shelter in the stars, aspiring to be born us to breathe. We speak our thoughts into the air. We refuse to let the winds forget our voices and our names. We repeat them until it whispers back, and it will cut through the wind's path like the cuts on our palms, to remind it that it can always have a change of direction if things go wrong. Etched on our hands are forgotten love notes, because not every soul gets the opportunity to be loved. Not every child can afford to dream. So I fall into a sleep so deep Sleepwalk, carrying dreams as big as the moon. I may get lost in this love and forget my way back to my room. Sleepwalk to dreamers kept up by the darkness. Share pieces of this moon so they can fall unconscious among stars. See, reality is overrated. This is how in a sorrow-filled world we've made it this far. Not daydreaming during day jobs, but turning daydreams to day jobs. Wearing hope around our neck like an IV line, with the hopes that we'll survive, that we won't flatline on faith this time. Won't turn on the TV to watch faith rewind. We do what we can for those who can't. We grow large enough to show people a sign. Etched on our hands is a guide to survival. Tears in our palms. We spoke, we screamed, we held on for this long. So that even when we sleep, the winds will continue whispering our songs, changing directions with our pain. We won't let it forget our names. We won't let it forget our names. We won't let it forget our names.
Oh, leave me alone. As I stand my streets, I don't know where I'm going, but I'll find you back here. Leave me alone.
Thank you guys so much. Appreciate it. And thank you guys. Thank you, my peoples, for the opportunity. Thank you, Angelica, for joining me on stage. I appreciate all of you. Thank you so much.
When we started My Peoples, it was an idea, it was a conversation, and now we are on our 7th episode, dealing with propaganda in the media. Now, with the convention season approaching and leaving much work to do on our quest for an honest representative and evolved democracy, forums for actionable conversations are more important than ever. We're here to discuss the role of media in the process as we engage in conversation around the politics of propaganda and its implications on voters and their voices. First off, I'd like to start with a really great quote by the social psychologist Alex Carey. The 20th century is characterized by 3 developments of great political importance: the growth of democracy, the growth of corporate power, and the growth of corporate propaganda as a means of protecting corporate power against democracy. The second quote is, "It is arguable that the success of business propaganda in persuading us for so long that we are free from propaganda is probably one of the most significant propaganda achievements of the 20th century." Now, I like to say, because as Americans, we are taught what propaganda is, how to spell it, how to define it, how to use it in a sentence, we somehow do not think that we are subject to it. I have a feeling that many on this panel disagree. Darnell Moore, I'd like to start with you. You are an incredible activist and advocate, writer, journalist. You are the senior correspondent of Mike News. You worked quite a lot in the LGBTQ forums and Black Lives Matter. Now, from the coverage of the primaries to the Orlando shootings and the pouncing of people to claim the narrative of the Orlando shootings to push forward their agendas, the SCOTUS nine-word ruling on immigration, the Dem platform hearings about the Dem platform going forward. We've seen a lot of these issues portrayed in the media, and the corporate media being very at odds with what the issues really called for and the narratives have called for. How do you try to counter that narrative?
Yeah, so first, I'm really grateful to be on this panel with you all, particularly in a space like this. So the first sign that we know that propaganda is real and that it can actually be big business for people is the fact that Media Quant did a study that found that the airtime that Trump received equaled something about $2 billion worth of money. Yeah. That the media gave via airtime. In other words, it's possible that the media, corporate media, makes money, big money, and gain viewers off of some of the very dangerous propaganda that the media now laments. The way that we see this functioning in terms of movements, it was interesting to me that you can see an uptick in media outlets writing about Black Lives Matter. everyone wanted to have a hashtag Black Lives Matter story because it was the thing that drew viewers in, right? But just because one writes or includes Black Lives Matter as a trending topic within media does not mean that these media outlets care about Black lives. Just because we are seeing stories that say, pray for Orlando, or the focus is on Orlando, because it is the thing that one must talk about in the moment, because it is the thing of the moment, does not necessarily mean that one cares about the tangible, lived out, real experiences of LGBTQ people. So the danger is this. We commodify, like any of these things that we are supposedly cared about can be commodified and emptied of their value. We write about Black Lives Matter because it's the sexy thing to do. We talk about Orlando. You had Congress people who went and tweeted about Orlando for whom voted against legislation that could have actually protected LGBT people. So we find ourselves in a really big quandary. Like, it's a fine line that we must all walk. And as a media person, for me, it's about telling the truth. How can you be fair and report on Trump, knowing at the same time that reporting on Trump, and it might be another reason for us to spew xenophobia, racism, homo and queer antagonism, and so much else. I think the bottom line is, where's your integrity? But the question is going to be for us, that word becomes a very fuzzy thing within corporate media when they're making money off of a lot of the propaganda that's out there in the first place.
Yeah. We've actually seen in the numbers that Trump definitely has gotten $2 billion worth of free media, and actually he hasn't been raising very much money. He hasn't spent very much money on his campaign. His entire campaign has depended upon actually the free media that he has been getting. So this idea that this man has come and taken over this country is a false narrative, because actually the media has given us Trump, right? One of the things I know for you dealing with narratives that are really hard for you, Mark Bartlett, is that exact same thing. Looking at, working in the private prison arena and wanting to really inject into it a lot of information, not just the private prison complex, but also the private treatment complex, and all of the things that people take for granted that we are starting to get access to with media, but actually is just another way of sort of covering and changing the focus point. So we don't really see who the bad guys or the good guys are in these different areas.
No, we don't. And I'd actually like to let people know to actually think about the people that are incarcerated. Think about the 2.2 million people who are incarcerated behind bars, those who have been disenfranchised from our communities, those who have been stigmatized and labeled as criminals, as thugs, as convicts. They are now a commodity. They are not a human being. And with that, the media portrays people of color, people who come from low-income communities, as thugs, which leads to the criminalization of these people, which leads to people being deported with private prison industries taking over, to where now it is a business where it's sickening when you're profiting off of human beings. Why invest in prisons when we can actually invest in people? And I always say it is so much more powerful. Invest in people, invest in the institutions in our communities so that we can prevent people from entering these systems of formal control, to where, yes, the media does, they play a big role in the criminalization of people, and these corporations as well when it comes to private prisons and those that invest in private prisons. And most people don't even know the companies that invest in private prisons. Whole Foods, they use private prisons for slave labor, to where people are working pennies a day, dollars a day. And then you expect these people to re-enter society when there is no programs for people. So the system is set up for people to fail. There is no incentive to rehabilitate it. The only incentive is to profit and to turn human beings into a commodity.
Well, when you look at, the pushback that we saw in the primary that came from different supporters out there and voters demanding transparency, Hillary Clinton had to be shamed from taking monies from the private prison complex, and she ended up returning those funds. But a lot of that falls to people who are not afraid to push back and point the finger where that's not being done normally in these debates. Now, Lee Camp, you have with your show Redacted Tonight, which I'm obsessed with. He called I love, as you call it, the Daily Show with teeth, with razor-sharp teeth, I think. But you know, you use humor as a lot of ways in order to kind of hold people accountable in a way that corporate media isn't doing.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's so much information now that people need different ways to receive it, and that's why it's so amazing when people are getting the information out there via music or via comedy. You know, comedy can be shared by somebody who might disagree with it, and that's why I think it's so important. But I wanted to play off what someone else said, and like our media now, it's either 5 or 6 corporations own 80 to 90% of everything we hear, we see. It is all very tightly locked down, even though it has this appearance of freedom. And there are some key examples that I feel like will tell you everything you need to know about our corporate media. After the Boston bombing, CNN got the highest rating they've had in decades, or maybe a decade. And they got, later in unbiased reporting, said they got 50% of everything wrong that they reported that day and the day after. And it didn't matter to them at all. They didn't apologize. The CEO came out and said it was great ratings and it was wonderful. And that's they don't care about the truth. They care about what's getting ratings. And what's more important than whether it's a positive or negative story, as Donald Trump is proving, is what they're not mentioning. Another key example, Media Matters found that MSNBC over an 18-month period mentioned the Trans-Pacific Partnership, the largest trade deal ever conceived, that covers 40% of the world's economy, that is a corporate coup of the largest sense. They mentioned it 71 times over 18 months. 69 of those were by Ed Schultz, one guy who was then pushed out. So there are things that are not being mentioned that's the key to propaganda, is what's not being talked about, what's not being mentioned, who's not allowed on those airwaves. And it goes down, it's not just big things. For example, Melissa Harris Perry recently was pushed out of MSNBC, and she did interviews because she refused to sign the non-disclosure agreement. She did interviews, and she said after the Super Bowl, MSNBC refused to let her talk about Beyonce's Black Power Super Bowl performance. They came and specifically said, no, you cannot speak about this. That's how strict this is, what topics are allowed and aren't allowed. And she came out and said that, but most of the people are not willing to say what they're not allowed to talk about. And it really is what's not being covered more than what's being said, positive or negative, on any given channel.
Now, there's going to be a march tomorrow in CNN to say that, yes, Bernie Sanders is still in the race and that we need to continue talking about the issues. Now, as we've seen, the corporate media narrative has been, well, Bernie existed solely for the benefit of pulling Hillary to the left and pulling Trump to the left and pulling the issues to the left. And we've already seen now, during these Dem hearings of the Dem platform, that they're already voting against a $15 minimum wage, right, voting for the TPP deal, voting against a carbon tax. You know, you are a Bernie or bust person, wonderful Yahné Ndgo. Big claim to fame being they tried to shut you down on CNN and correct you and convince you that you were wrong. And you continue to explain your platform and why you are still Bernie or bust. How important is that to make sure that you claim that narrative and distinguish it, because it's not being well represented?
Well, I think there are a few ways to look at the importance. I mean, it's important to me to always be authentic. And, you know, and that's my authentic place. I care about people and I care about this planet. And because of that, there's absolutely no way that I could ever vote for Hillary Clinton. And beyond that, because of that, I will actually spend every moment I have from now until November fighting her as well as Donald Trump's access to the White House. And so, you know, there's that personal importance, but I've also come to understand how important it is to other individuals because of the reaction. You know, I didn't know what was going to happen when I went in there. I just, you know, responded to people honestly, and or to those two people, honestly. But the response has been overwhelming because so many people never had. I mean, and that goes to what you were saying, Lee, about what's not said and what's not shared through the media. No one is saying, like, if I get on one of those spots again, which I probably never will. If I'm live, people have interviewed me, they stop me and they don't know who I am, they don't know my position, and they'll ask me questions, and then they edit it and they put nothing that I said in what they show.
Right, so it has to be live.
Right, but if it's live, that's exactly what I want to do, is I want to challenge these individuals who are representing themselves as journalists and asking them, why are you not talking about what the Clintons did and holding back support against the Rwandan genocide? Why are you not talking about the Clintons stealing land, taking land from the Haitians, farmland from the Haitians, and building factories there, and then supporting them being paid 31 cents an hour? Why are you not talking about these issues that are important for people to know when they're trying to make a decision about whether or not they want a person to be the leader of the free world? And so the importance of the authenticity, the importance of the voice of all people, is the thing that's constantly being compromised when we're in these through our media. And I think that it's criminally irresponsible, particularly when we are in a moment in time where the entire future of the world is hinging on the results of this election. And when you think about Josh Fox's film, that's going to be premiering, it's going to be showing on HBO on June 27th.
All the things climate can't change.
Right, and it's an incredible movie, and I think every human being needs to see this documentary, but it really makes it extraordinarily clear that we are in a moment in time that will define whether or not the world that we know is completely destroyed. Yeah. It's not, people are like, oh, we can think about 2018, we need to focus on 2020. We do not have time. Yeah. We do not have time. Yeah. We have to be all about it right now, at this moment. And so, like, everywhere I go, on my way flying here, I ran into these two young sisters from New York, and I was like, are you coming to the DNC? And they were like, what is that about? And I spent an hour, because our plane was delayed for 2 hours. I spent an hour talking to these two young women about all of the reasons that they need to be fighting against Hillary Clinton's presidency. Not just not voting for her, but also fighting against it and talking to everyone they know to make sure that they are not voting for her either. And that's what we have to do, because our lives are depending on what we do right now, and our children's lives especially depend on what we do at this moment in time right now.
Going and talking across the country and sitting with people as they cared how personal these issues were. And one of the things that I came across was, as we were pushing and talking about Bernie, that they were feeling like they had hope fatigue. They had come out for President Obama, and his whole campaign was about hope, and then they didn't get what they expected. Darnell, you wrote a really interesting piece really distinguishing Obama as president and Obama as a runner-up for president, a nominee. Can you go a little bit more into the distinctions about that and why that is relevant in the conversation around the symbolic presidency of someone like Hillary Clinton? Because if you're talking about historics, obviously Bernie Sanders being a grassroots president, that would be a historical thing. So you can compare historical aspects to both of their stories, but there's a huge symbolism behind Hillary Clinton that people are really stuck to, but there's a pushback as well against what that represented with Obama. Yeah,
I think it's important. So for many of us who were part of that Obama moment, Obama was a symbol of a lot of different things for us, a symbol of hope. The campaign really sort of preached this idea that this would be a movement. It was like a social movement in development. And let's keep it very real, there were so many of us who really wanted to push for a progressive seeming president who was also black. All right, so like the idea that many people got lost in Obama's blackness really did allow many of us to not scrutinize more clearly his politics. 8 years later, 7, 8 years later, many of us who voted for Obama are now going, wait a minute, it isn't the idea that one needs a black president in a presidency that's been all male, all white. Which black president? What are your politics? So in the same way where the argument is, well, isn't it time to end patriarchy and put a woman in the presidency? I think the question is, yes, it's time to end patriarchy. Yes, it's time to end patriarchy. Yes, it's time to end patriarchy. But which woman should we be putting in the White House? What is her politics, right? And I think that distinction helps us to get over the symbolic aspect of this. Because I was a few days before I wrote that piece, I was on a panel where they were saying, we need more black men in the education field because there's only 2%. And I'm like, no. I want more black men, but I want the black men in the room who actually have a feminist politic, black men in the room who care about the earth, black men in the room who are not homo and queer antagonistic. In the same way that I'm asking those questions, I do want a woman president, right? But the woman, if we're going to have one, should be aligned. We should have a politics that's in alignment with the best of the progressive politics that's out there now.
And anybody who says they're just voting for Hillary because she's a woman, ask them whether they supported Sarah Palin.
Or Jill Stein, for that matter, who actually has the largest amount of votes as a president.
And by the way, Jill Stein's up to 7% nationally. Gary Johnson, 10%. Between the two of them, that's almost 20% of the country.
There you go. Talking about just the will of the people and what they want. Across the board, we're seeing the numbers there to support universal health care, to support assault ban, rifle bans, so many different things. We're watching right now with not just the Dem platform, but just in this sit-in that has been called now a publicity stunt. The no bill, no break, which lasted for 25 hours. There was no bill and they went on a break. It was largely for the no-fly, no-buy aspect, not actually for banning assault weapons or for making sure that there were stricter guidelines for background checks and things. Adam Green tweeted that his organization had been lobbying for a discharge petition for assault weapons ban for a week now, and there's been 0 takers. The leader, Nancy Pelosi, House Minority Leader Nancy Pelosi has been the problem, he said, and it's been very frustrating. So how is that when you have a party that is hijacking the narrative of progressivism, but isn't actually backing it up with legislation, with votes, with the return of that? What does that look like? How do you combat that, Mark?
I mean, you think about it, think about prison reform, right? We've been talking about prison reform for quite some time, criminal justice reform. And with that, I mean, it's a fight. There's legislation in place now, but nothing's being passed to where they're not taking action. Yes, it's good to take a seat and fight for a cause, but what are you actually doing? Let's fight for healthcare. Let's fight for education, prison reform, criminal justice. Let's fight for the people. Let's just not just create a publicity stunt to get attention to where, oh, you know what, they're doing a good thing. No, there's so much more to do. And it's a constant battle every day. And I tell the people, us as people, it's up to us to challenge them. We could create that movement where we take a seat. Imagine thousands and millions of people rising and fighting for a cause. We can care less about the 10 that sits in a circle, but it's up to us as people to create change. And when I talk about creating change, it's creating change by making all lives matter. All lives matter. So,
thank you.
Now, it's interesting because the Democrats position themselves as the People's Party. The DNC, in their Victory Task Force report commissioned by Deborah Wasserman Schultz, released late last year, had a quote in the report that said, "We believe that the people are the source of all governmental power, that the authority of the people is to be extended, not restricted. This can be accomplished only by providing each citizen with every opportunity to participate in the management of the government. They must have that, we believe." Sounds to me that you're just as baffled as I am that they actually came up to that conclusion and have this far not enacted that whatsoever.
And anyway, I mean, when we look at the voter suppression and the election fraud. I mean, it's the most elemental aspect of the governmental process is your ability to just go in and choose the person who's going to represent you. And we've had, we've had the election completely hijacked, and that's been demonstrated. You know, I mean, we experienced it. So many of us experienced it. So many people stood in line for hours. So many people went to turn in their ballots and then were told that they weren't on the roll because the roll was printed 20 days before registration was actually over. You know, and so, you know, and we witnessed it also with the leak from Lucifer. Is it
Lucifer 2?
Lucifer 2.0, when they basically, you know, spoke about how they had already decided on Hillary Clinton before the election process ever began.
So the hacker who came out with the materials, they'd hacked into the DNC and figured out, they got up all the stuff that they had on Trump, and also a memo that had come through saying that they were working to muddy the waters for Hillary's record and
attacks on her ethics.
Yeah.
They wanted to muddy the waters.
They wanted to muddy the water on that and basically label them all GOP smears if anything came up. They were working with the media and the campaign to make sure to push her agenda forward.
Right, and that's not a democratic process at all, and that's not giving people the right to choose the individual who they want to lead, you know, the progress of our nation and our world in any way.
No.
I mean, I'm very, you know, I personally believe that I don't know if anybody else is thinking that, you know, a rigged primary is the only thing that will get rigged and that the general would not be rigged.
Yeah.
But, you know, I really am very confident that that's why they went ahead and made those horrible decisions around the platform, because they feel like it doesn't matter anyway what they do and whether or not the people are for it, because they've already fixed the general election. And we have to be thinking much more creatively and much more aggressively about how to remangle and take it back into our own hands to ensure that what we have chosen is what we actually get.
Yeah. You know, as we're seeing more and more and more, it's really kind of being left to citizen journalism and alternative journalism to actually even look at that. Corporate media actually showed and went into the reality of what materials there were there around Trump, so somewhat validating the information that came from Lucifer 2, but they ignored this memo that showed very clearly that a year ago, after Bernie had already joined in, that they were very much colluding to make sure that Hillary was going to be the nominee, which we've been talking about all year long. How did that feel to be validated when you've been talking about this entire time? This election is definitely rigged. Their DNC is absolutely working in collusion with the media. This piece of information comes out that validates it and points to it, and then nothing happens.
I know, and they did what you just said. They flooded the media coverage about it, about how the Trump opposition research or whatever, so they didn't have to talk about the fact that the memos also showed working with the Hillary campaign, or the memos showed that they were leaving the Hillary campaign, or DNC was leaving stories with no fingerprints with the media. And then I saw tweets from media saying, yes, I was approached multiple times to do Bernie bro stories, you know, anti-Bernie stories with no fingerprints. So it's something that we all kind of knew, but here it is laid out for us. And the mainstream media won't mention it, won't talk about it, and that's why you see the lowest, mainstream media has the lowest, approval rating or faith in it that has ever existed. And that's honestly why Bernie's campaign has even been able to get as big as it has, is because people are going elsewhere for their information.
That show right there.
This show right here.
And like I said on the show that aired last night, I was like, yeah, this is the world we live in. People are getting their information from comedians and hackers.
So speaking of which,
it's crazy. It's insane.
Speaking of which,
Lizz Winstead. Speaking of amazing comedian.
I'm so sorry. That means I was on another panel. No, it's okay. This means, unfortunately, we're at our break point where Darnell Moore is going to have to leave. Just as I wanted to get into Obama versus Bernie Bros.
Oh.
Thank you, Lizz Winstead, for joining us in the Daily Show.
And she's gone. That was it. Lizz Winstead, everybody.
We got another comedian coming up, Ramy Youssef, right now, who's going to be showing us what's what in regards.
All right. What up? Yeah. Yo, what up? Can you guys hear me?
Pounding my peoples.
I know there's some audio. You guys hear me in the back? There's audio This is what the media's trying to do to us, man. They don't want you to hear us. They're trying to put us in a convention center. What's up, guys? Rosario, thank you for having me. This is an awesome panel. I'm happy to be here to talk about the media. It's a big part of my life. I'm Muslim, like from the news. Have you guys seen us? It's not been good. I'm very aware of the way the storylines are weaved with the news. And it really affects me because even though I am like, when I watch the way they cover Muslims, like, I'm convinced. I'm like watching this whole thing with Orlando. I'm like, am I gonna do some shit? Like what? Like what's happening? It's that scary to me. Like I don't know what's happening. Like in this whole week, man, these past 2 weeks, I've really wanted a girlfriend. And I don't even know if it's because I'm in love or if it's just because of Orlando. Like I'm just watching all this stuff and I just want somebody to hold, you know? Like just, you guys ever feel like that? You just want, like it's a rainy day or like after a mass shooting, you just want to have somebody like that post-massacre cuddle, just somebody to like watch the CNN news ticker with. You felt like that, dude. Right? Dude. None of it makes any sense. Like the way they're weaving it, like you guys know, everyone here knows about Dennis Hastert. Yeah, most people don't though. This guy was the longest serving Republican Speaker of the House and he molested children. And nobody knows about it because they covered it last month for 1 day. But Jared from Subway, you know, the sandwiches, they talked about him for a year. Like we know what's going on with him in prison. It's crazy. It's just proof that the media is run by Quiznos. This whole thing, they've been running it from the beginning. It's crazy. I fell asleep watching Fox News. I got so scared. I woke up at 2 a.m., my printer started going off, and I thought ISIS was trying to print stuff at my house. Like they saw my name and they're like, yeah, he'll let us. And I would never join ISIS, but I realized in that moment, I was like, I think I might let them print something, you know? Like if they came in, they have my mom and they were like, 5 sheets, color. Like, what would you do, man? It's crazy. Like, I wouldn't let them scan, but I'm just so scared. And I don't know if you guys have felt this recently, but with everything that's going on, I just realized that I really miss Saddam Hussein. You guys know what I'm talking about? You ever up at night and just like, Saddam, no, why'd we do that? No? Like, think about it. ISIS has destroyed the whole world. They're grabbing children from everywhere, turning them into monsters, destroying economies. Think about Saddam. Good old days, huh? It's kind of nice, you know? Like, we knew when the beheadings were coming. It was very organized. But this whole thing now, it's just like if you had to pick, dude, ISIS or Saddam Hussein, who would you pick? Saddam, huh? I hear a couple. Saddam, yeah. You miss him. We all do. And we all have a Saddam Hussein in our lives, you know, like that person we thought was terrible. And then a couple years go by, you're with somebody new, she really hurts you, and then you really feel it, and you're like, oh, I miss you, Saddam. Yeah, man, right here, my dude, my seat. Yeah, you know what I'm talking about, dude. You have a Saddam, I see it. Call her. Tell her I'm sorry, I took 9/11 out on you. You didn't have weapons of mass destruction. I did, you know? You guys know, you know what I'm talking, like, this guy who's running for president now, the nominee, I don't say his name, but you ever watch him and then there's that part of you and it hits you and you're like, I miss George Bush. Yeah, you all do. All right, guys, thanks so much. Thanks for letting me talk. Give it up for Rosario. This whole thing is amazing. Thank you.
Loved seeing the guilt in everyone's face agreeing. Thank you, Lizz Winstead, for joining us.
Oh my God, thank you.
Absolutely. You just are an amazing person. Obviously, you helped co-create The Daily Show. Thank you very, very, very much for that. I keep actually quoting and saying thank you. See, this is why this election has been so different than any other previous election, because Jon Stewart told us how to roll the tape. So we're not just being fed by corporate media and just listening and being brainwashed by the misinformation that we're getting. We're actually going, no, 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 no. You literally said something different a year ago. In print media, many corporations rate their writers not only by quality of writing, but how beneficial the writing is to their advertisers. Is there journalism still present, or is it now all just entertainment for ratings and advertisers?
I mean, can you hear me?
No.
My mic's not on?
It is right there.
It's in my, oh, that's my phone.
No, it's on, but I think you just gotta lean in, just lean in.
Oh, okay.
As they say, lean
I'll
in.
just do that. You guys don't
Lean
care,
in.
right?
Just lean in.
I don't know how you can say that you have a media you can trust when you have sponsors who are dictating what happens in your media. I think it is a joke to ever believe that, and it's insane. And the thing that we forget a lot about is the fact that when you're watching a cable news show that's on at 9 p.m., those ad dollars that they're fighting for is not just for other cable dollars, it's also for The Voice and everything else, right? So the amount of hype that these advertisers want you to have in your show so that it is entertainment and so that it is compelling completely negates the messaging that we need. And so it's really important to look to people like Lee, who has a great show. If you don't watch his show, he's incredible.
Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp.
But to also figure out what kind of world you think you want to live in and seek out the people who are writing about that, because people ask me a lot, like, how do we, you know, what do we do about Trump or whatever? And half the time I'm like, I don't really know what we do about Trump, but what I do know is we need to be vocal and present and on the ground and personally there about the things we do believe in so we can drown out bullshit. Because bullshit happens, how are you gonna rise above it and tamp it down and delegitimize it? That is your job and it's my job. So that's what I think.
Well,
Can I answer your question? Okay.
Well, The Economist and The Washington Post reported a study by the investment research firm showing that lobbying gave companies a return of 22,000%. That means for every dollar spent, they earned $2,517 back as a return of their investment. So with many of these same corporations being the ones controlling the media, could we basically then draw the conclusion that corporate media is just a simple tool for lobbying in the US? Right? So if that's the case, and we're saying we want to take the money out of politics, do we also need the money out of advertising? You do not take money from any kind of corporate media things. You do crowdfunding for your show.
No, my show's on RT America, which because there's no ads, it was one of the only places I could go because my stuff is so anti-corporate that we can't, like, nobody who's advertising for corporations wants me. They don't want to get near me because that doesn't mean that no Walmart joke or Walmart statement exists on other networks. It just means you can't go after them again and again. You got to be quiet eventually. So I needed a network that didn't have advertising. It was really the only place I could go.
So is that the only way moving forward for all of us? Is that where we have to start taking the money out of every sort of aspect of our lives in order to have any integrity with it? Or do you think there's any means of getting integrity?
I mean, there are things that make money, citizen journalists that make money that just aren't accountable to the ads. I think the Young Turks is a good example. I think, you know, they make their money off of ad dollars, but none of those companies are able to tell them turn your channel off. So there are ways to do it, but and I think that's why the Bernie Sanders movement exists at all. You would not, at the beginning of this a year ago, I think he would have been at the level that Jill Stein has, was at 2012 without citizen media and, online journalists and everything like that. But people aren't getting their news at the mainstream media as much anymore, and that's the key. And that's also why it's so much young people. It's young people that are under 40 that are for these other movements outside of the mainstream because they're getting their news elsewhere. So it is a very positive, even though these look like very dark times. There's a lot of positive to see in it. There's a lot of positive of the way things are changing. And I think there's a massive shift happening. And if we can keep the internet free, keep net neutrality, keep citizen journalists funded and out there, I think things can keep changing.
So let's push back against some of the narratives that we're seeing right now. So we saw the no bill, no break thing that went out there. It was called the publicity stunt, I think, for a good reason. Why is the no fly, no buy zone not working? Like, why is that not a good list? Why does that not actually give us the traction that we're talking about? So when you're looking at it and these no-fly lists are incredibly racist, you found that half of them don't have any association with any terrorist groups. You find that there are veterans on that list, congressional members on that list. You know, you're looking at it as a very larger sort of piece of legislation in the same way of stop and frisk and racial profiling. How can you talk into a little bit for you, what kind of narrative, how do you want us to be talking about the private prison complex, deportation detention centers, how we're talking about the private treatment complex? How can we be educated moving forward to push back against the narrative that we're seeing right now so we can actually inject some real conversation about these issues and get some traction?
So we just basically need to understand how money drives the prison system today, right? This is why it's deemed a prison industrial complex. And we need to understand the history of the complex, right? And how it's evolving into the treatment industrial complex, where they're now diving into re-entry, mental health, electronic monitoring. So with that, and electronic monitoring, if you guys know, those are those little things that come around the ankles. And with that, private companies own those now. So with that, the state is contracting basically bodies to these corporations. But us as people, we don't understand that. People don't even know that Hillary Clinton took over 130 grand from lobbyists for private prisons. But the media don't cover that. But we need to start looking at the system. If we're here in California, we're spending 60 grand to incarcerate one adult. We're spending 230 grand to incarcerate a juvenile. If we're willing to spend money on incarceration, why not spend that money in people? Spend that money in the community. You know, and start spending money in education. Start investing in the communities. Let's take money out of prisons, out of these corporations, and put money into people. So, you know, and we need to understand when you have, and even nonprofits in general, if you're a nonprofit and you take money from these corporations, you're tied into the complex. You know, so we need to, it starts from the ground up, you know, and it needs to be where people who are released from custody deserve a second chance in life to re-enter society, and so that the community brings them in, you know, makes them feel like a human being. Because these people have been stigmatized, right, and labeled as criminals and are considered numbers, no longer human beings. And us as people, we need to look at them in a different light. We need to look at people who have been incarcerated, just like you and I. We're all human beings. So take them in. Don't consider them a number. And I challenge all of you, don't use the term inmate. Use the term human being. Use the term individual. Justice involved individual. And with that, you know, let's push those in power to start putting money into the communities. And it's a constant battle every single day. And imagine how demoralizing it could be for someone who's incarcerated. Imagine having to check the box on an application for a job and to be rejected the next day. And it's like that every day. So when you're doing that, you're creating a cycle for individuals to return back to custody when they don't have no opportunity. They lose hope. They start to lose hope. And I can't express enough how important hope is. Having hope and looking at people as human beings. And you know, and I'm truly passionate about it, man. My lips are sweating now because you know, I get so passionate about people in general, you know, and you know, and that's something, you know, as a child, I was kind of blind to, you know. Me being half white, I was blind to my privilege in society. But now I see it today and I want to harp on it. And I want to let people know that, man, blacks and browns, we're being criminalized. And people need to understand that. It's so much more harder for a person of color to do the things in life that he or she loves, you know. And
I wanted to jump in with a couple of things that what you said made me think about. You know, so one thing, just really quickly, is, you know, and I talk about this with people, when you look at the numbers, right, like the percentages of the population, of the prison population, and how that relates to the percentages of the various, you know, categories of human beings that are in our country, you know, there's one of two things that is happening. Either people are being targeted because of their category, or certain people are born criminals. And so, like, you know, people need to be asking themselves, like, do you really think that just because I was born from a black woman that I have natural criminal tendencies that were born with me? Because that's the only thing that makes sense, unless I'm being targeted as a black woman or as a brown person, you know, to be having such high numbers in the prison industry. You know, but when you look at some other things, like the fact that a lot of the people who are on the boards of these prisons and making money from these prisons are also the same people who are shareholders, not on the boards, but shareholders for things like the music, a lot of these music labels that started putting out this really, this criminal music, like this, you know, and so then you're perpetuating, and when it comes to like language, when it comes to messaging, you're exciting people about criminal activities. You're telling them that their value comes from this kind of activities, and that what the people in their community are about is related to certain kinds of activities, while you're taking away their education, you know, and getting the money for their education invested into your private prison that you're a shareholder of, so you make money off the music and you make money off the prison and off of the education all at the same time. And, you know, so that, you know, that piece of it. And the last little thing I just wanted to say, I did a lecture a while ago called The Power of the Spoken Word, and it talks about how language is the foundation for all of the atrocities that we experience. And so, for instance, when you look at, if you look at the movement into Africa during the Crusades and during colonization, before people could do that, they had to first decide that all of the people in that land and communicate to the people in the communities that they were from, that the people in that land were savages, that they were not human. You know, you have to use language to like separate and create this difference. When you look at the Holocaust and you look at the language that was used before people were able to be convinced that this method, that murdering all of these people and imprisoning all these people was right, there was this, you know, the bacilli, there was this language that was being introduced to change your aspect of your perception about the humanity of those individuals. And it's the same thing that happens now. Like, I used to watch that show Cops, and you would see them and they would be like, there's a man over there who's walking down the street. Oh wait, now look, that thug is running. Oh wait, now that criminal's being kicked by the cops. But you know, like you're reducing their humanity with the language that you use. And we do really have to your point, we have to be really, really vigilant about how we speak about other human beings, and always remember their humanity is the basic piece of it, you know. And we have to police ourselves, and we have to police, because language is at the base of our songs, it's the base of our movies, you know, our advertisement. Like, everything starts with words. So if we are being really, really particular, not only with what we say, but when we read things, when you need to know your trigger words, and you need to know when you're reading something or you're hearing something on the news and people are using language to describe people that is not just based on their humanity, they're separating them and differentiating them. Like, they don't say when the criminal was a white man, but they always say when the criminal was a black man, or they always say if the criminal was transgender. You know, there are these communities that we use language to kind of separate, and then we build this narrative up about how they're the people we need to be careful about, when we're really all at the very, very truest place. We're all just people. We're just all people, and that's the only thing, that our connection is so much stronger than our differences. The differences are so minimal, and we have to stop buying into them. We have to stop investing into the ideas that they're not, because, you know, we're twins, you know, and that's our triplet. So, you know, we're all the same, really, at the base of it. You know, the things, we all bleed red. I mean, we all know this, but we forget it. We forget it when we keep being bombarded with the propaganda that we're thinking that we're not actually subject to.
And if a Muslim murders someone, it's a terrorist. If a white guy does it, it's a lone wolf, all right?
Right, with mental health issues.
He has mental health issues, yeah.
Right.
But I feel like, do you have that? I feel like I have that, where I look at the news, maybe because my dad is cynical and taught me to watch the news and view the news that way. But whenever I watch something, I always go, okay, what are they not saying? What are they trying to cover up here, right? So like seeing Obama actually go down, President Obama and Vice President Biden go down to Orlando after the shooting, but it took him months to go to Flint, right? So like immediately I go, well, what about that narrative was different, that was safe for them all to jump on and try to claim it, you know, because they were trying to push the differences between it being a terrorist attack, a hate crime. You could see everyone just jump, like this is like the chomping at the bit to make sure that their narrative could push their agenda forward rather than it being about people. Because if it was about people, we would have seen some traction going ahead. Is that how you go and figure out what story you're going to tell?
Oh, yeah. I'm really classy. So for me, just to jump on what everybody has said, it's the long slog of how we get to racial inequality and income inequality so that we can create all of these narratives that you said is to make sure that there's haves and have-nots. And then when people are finding themselves struggling in whatever that is, that we have become a society that more than ever defines poverty as a character flaw. Yes. And once you define poverty as a character flaw, the world is the oyster of the privilege, because once there is a character flaw, then you can blame people for their own shooting, their own beatings, their own everything, and then that feeds into filling those prisons full of the customers that they need, because now everybody but the 1% has a character flaw that can be justified. And I believe that that is like one of the single biggest things that we talk about. And so the thing with bringing it back to the comedy, and the thing that's really interesting is that like I get called out all the time for I get called all these dumb names like social justice warrior and all this other bullshit, because I actually believe that you're weak ass yelling at me because I actually defend people when you go, I'm an equal opportunity offender. And it's like, no, you're not, because there's no equal opportunity. You're just a dick who punches down. That's what you are. And so, like, nobody calls them out. And so I said to one dude, I'm like, oh, if you're super edgy, first of all, I'm like the abortion comedian. Go over there. I'm fucking fighting for like shit that's crazy. So where are your jokes that really take on cops who shoot innocent people? Where are your jokes about corporate America? If you're so edgy, why are you so desperate to make sure that you are gonna call people out who call you out on shit that people don't wanna hear because you're tackling people who don't have a voice? And so for me, you know, you take a lot of hits, but I always feel like when the comedy comes, it's like, who's being targeted? Who can I help be a voice, not for, but with? Because I don't want to be anybody's voice, but I want to be part of a system of people that are like, let's elevate these voices. So, you know, it's a very crazy thing when we talk about that stuff.
Yeah. I just wanted to really quickly, to what you're saying, just say that, you know, that's like when people were blaming Tamir Rice and his family for his murder, and you know, and you triggered that, and I wanted to, you know, speak to that, because I don't know if people are aware, today is the day that Tamir Rice would have turned 14 if he had not been murdered. And you know, and so, you know, I just wanted to speak to that and honor that today is Tamir Rice's birthday. And you know, because his murder, it haunts me constantly. It never ever stops. Like it constantly haunts me. And the idea that anyone can be blamed other than the officers who killed him for that murder, you know, speaks exactly to that point. Because if that young man had come from wealth, you know, if that young man was a white girl, you know, I mean, the whole narrative would have been completely different.
Stanford swimmer.
The Stanford swimmer rape, right? We saw that with him, and the reality that it was more about the fact about what his future could be compromised, rather than, you know, which is always sort of the rape story, which is like, what did she do to deserve it, kind of thing. You created an organization called Lady Parts.
Lady Parts Justice, yeah.
Lady Parts Justice. Can you talk a little bit about the name, why, and how? Necessity for this organization.
So, the name came, I had moved, I'm from Minnesota originally, and I was writing a book in 2011, and I moved back to Minnesota with my 2 dogs so I could finish the book because I couldn't do it in New York. And it was right when Congress and then subsequently state legislatures all over the country had started proposing these draconian laws against reproductive justice, reproductive rights, reproductive access. And I didn't know what to do. And so I had to get back to New York with my dogs in a van. And so I called up a clinic and I said, I'm thinking of driving across country and just doing fundraisers for you. What do you think? And they're like, who are you? And I was like, this is not the point. The point is I kind of want to just come and do this. So my first stop from Minnesota was Michigan. And I met this state senator from Michigan named Lisa Brown. And she was banned from saying the word vagina on the floor of the Michigan State House because she was fighting a transvaginal ultrasound bill, which is basically state rape. So when she said to this person, actually not person, the Speaker of the State Senate, what should I use? He said something that we can all accept, like lady parts.
This is from our
actual elected officials. And so I was so outraged, that we would just talk about this issue in just terms of just gender anyway. So I actually named my organization something that I can't stand, but I wanted to make a point. So it's interesting because I've had trans allies and say, which sounds very exclusive, Lady Parts Justice. And I said, actually it's not. It's actually, I'm not trying to be cutesy, I'm not at all. I'm just, this is a thing that happened that I can explain in the broader picture that it's uncool. So our organization's super inclusive and we talk about reproductive rights and justice in ways that are often gender nonconforming. Sometimes I use women because I think it's important to, but it's not only women that experience all of this shit. So we do a couple of things. We make videos that are funny, that take on all the hypocrisy and all the politicians. And the second thing we do is this sort of combo USO Habitats for Humanity thing where we travel to really hard hit states like Mississippi, Kentucky, Alabama. We're going to build a fence in Texas and we go help the clinics out with emotional support and then also literally with grunt work. So it's super rewarding. It's really fun.
I can't say just how, difficult it is talking to folks when, they're losing their minds because someone like Donald Trump says women should get punished for getting an abortion. And, I, like Bernie Sanders, go, we should stop giving attention to that. And then people lose their minds and go, what, don't you think women's rights are important? And I go, yeah, but did you not know already that women are already getting punished for getting an abortion? Like this reality that these politicians in this election somehow are defeated, that we're gonna get this mentality out of our process is ridiculous. As we're watching this stunt sit-in, they're letting, it's just days later, a vote not happen on actual assault ban rights. Like, we're allowing the theatrics to distract us rather than really getting into the realities of what's actually going on the ground.
Well, and I would also just add that, I'm a Bernie supporter also, and I would just also add that if you want real change, then you need to learn about where really shitty things are happening in state legislatures, take that messaging and find those people, and whether, even like city councils, mayors, all this stuff. And so if we want to build a pipeline to actual equality in our democracy, we have to really start talking about shit that's real on local levels, because it's actually really exciting to talk to somebody and see somebody who's like running for city council for the first time. My brother's a mayor of a town in Minnesota, and it's really awesome. And I feel like you can actually win those battles. First of all, if you're a first timer or you're really in it, it's really cool. A lot of those races are lost by less than 100 votes or less than 500 votes. So if you and your friends get out there and you give a shit, you can start changing the narrative and getting people into a pipeline that we want instead of settling for these same old people over and over. I'm sorry, I just lectured, but.
So do you get, it feels like having to scour through, you hear someone say something and then you go, wait, that's completely wrong, and then you wait for the follow-up question in the debate and then it doesn't happen. Are you immediately then going and like finding the videos and like the backup? Like, do you wait, how do you end up putting that all together? Does that excite you? Or is it a point where it starts to just really depress you to see it day after day after day?
Oh, I mean, I have as much depression as anybody about where things are headed and climate change and everything else. But I think luckily I get to work in comedy, so I get to have that release, and that helps a lot. Otherwise, I think I would burn out pretty quickly. But I do find that my comedy stems from anger. So generally, my best pieces are when I'm like, "You fucking kidding me?" Those are the and just. Well, I know that when the Tourette starts, that's probably a good bit. That's probably going to be good. So, and luckily, there's that shit going on every day. If I watch an hour of C-SPAN, you watch some of the shit said on the House floor, and you just it's mind-blowing. But a lot of it is those little things where you're like, well, it did seem like they asked a tough question, but then there was no follow-up, and they let them get away with just the craziest answer. They let them dodge the question, and so it's that kind of things where I like holding people accountable, and so yeah, it does excite me, but of course it also angers me. They go hand in hand.
Well, and that also makes me wonder constantly, are you dumb? Or are you lazy, or are you in bed with whoever you're interviewing?
Right.
I know on, entertainment shows, publicists have conversations, and here's how you can handle the celebrity, here's what you can say or what you can't say, and it's the same thing on Meet the Press, where it's like, okay, ask this tough question, here's how we'll answer it, and you'll still get invited to the Donald Rumsfeld Christmas party, or you want to get on the boat, or you live in the shit. I always say, I don't trust anybody who lives in Washington who's reporting on Washington. There's way too much you want out of that system.
Yeah.
Way too much. People who are detached from it, looking at it from the outside. Those people are my friends.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
They're running my democracy. So fuck you. I don't need to go to your Christmas party. I have friends who have parties. I have parties.
And these people, these establishment media people, they know what to do to really keep rising in the ranks. They could look at some of their friends and some of their networks, Ed Schultz talks about the TPP, he's gone. Melissa Harris Perry, a little threatening, she's gone. Cenk Uygur was told, stop going after the establishment, he was gone. It's more and more, it's endless. Phil Donahue wouldn't get behind the Iraq War, he's gone. These people know what to say to make sure they stay at the big boys table,
So censorship is a really, really big deal. And as we're talking about that going forward with this administration, which this current administration has been incredibly tough on the Espionage Act, really tough on whistleblowers. In this campaign, in the primary season, we saw $1 million that was spent working with a super PAC, the Clinton campaign working with the super PAC, Correct the Record, to identify, target, and shame, bully, attack people online who needed to be corrected for not saying the right things about Hillary Clinton. What do you feel like we're moving forward? If that was happening during the primary season, if that was completely allowed and okay, which should have been illegal, if it was not talked about at all in our corporate media, and most people don't even understand it or know it, coming from a person who signed and said yes to the Patriot Act, what do you think is going to happen going forward regards to censorship? Because it seems like we're being censored everywhere, including online now.
Well, and you're talking about the paid trolls. There are these $1 million Hillary trolls, but there's also, now it's being shown, Google search manipulation. Eric Schmidt, the head of Alphabet, Google's parent company, is completely behind Hillary Clinton. And so we don't actually know how much manipulation of the search engine is happening, but it's pretty clear there's at least some, and that stuff is hugely influential. So it is happening online. It's not just the television media, the televised media.
So what do we do? Where do we get our information from? How do we move forward from here? As citizen journalists, yes, absolutely. That's why My People's is here. That's why your show is here. This is so important. But what is the call to action for everyone out here?
I think the call to action for everyone out here is that we who are doing these cool independent things maybe need to have a conversation amongst ourselves as well to make sure we're sharing the awesome stuff that you're putting out. If I'm gonna focus on repro, maybe like you see my stuff, you're like, I really trust you on this. I wanna really push you out. All the stuff that we're doing, I think those of us who are communicators need to really be communicating with each other about how we push stuff out, because if we've got 5 or 6 things in somebody's Twitter feed that's all really cool, that's like, okay, I'm gonna click on all that from my trusted sources. And then also just like face-to-face time matters. Like that shit just matters. And so be in spaces in smaller organizations that you feel like you can make a difference, and start having meetings again. We're not talking anymore. We're not having that. You know, the women's movement started in people's living rooms because nobody would talk to us, and we were shoved off the stage by the very same kind of shit that's happening now out there with progressive women saying, I'm an anti-war person and I kind of want to talk about shit that's going on with women now, and they're like, get the fuck off. We don't. It's like, oh, I'm sorry, what? So we need to support our own voices and have those voices start being dominant narratives. That's my suggestion.
And I think, you know, it really is a call to action where it's up to people like us to start running for office, right, in the community, at the local level. And we need to start talking about equality, equity, inclusion, you know, among all people. And with that, and we talk about taking action, I'm taking action. I'll tell you today, on July 5th in San Diego, I am protesting a hunger strike. I'm taking a leap of faith to protest against the Corrections Corporation of America, CCA. And that is what I am doing as me, as one person taking that leap, and others are following. And with that, it is a movement to put pressure on these corporations to where they know, man, these people are out there. There are thousands, there are millions. Because if not, we're silent, you know, to where we need to become the voice. We are the voice, you know, and we need to actually really take action. And action, you know, we talked about, you know, that publicity could have been, you know, publicity stunt there with those in a circle, you know, talking about banning, you know, but, you know, I believe we as people are so much stronger, and taking action, you just got to do it. You know, and that's what I plan to do. On July 5th, I'm taking action against CCA. And hopefully, you know, from there, people will start to join the movement and start to see the flaws in our system, in the criminal justice system, and start dialogue in the community. Because once we start dialogue, people will start to see the flaws, and they will want to join the movement because they will see, man, this system is setting up our people for failure. They're criminalizing blacks and browns. They're deporting people, you know, back into Mexico. You know, they're excluding people. And, you know, like, it's just up to us, you know, as people to start that movement.
Can I just say one more thing, and I'll stop?
Well, but I want to, just before, because I'd love for you to talk about this as well. You know, we've seen what happens when we don't, right? We're looking at that right now in England, where there was a huge propaganda conversation that went out there, disseminated, and then people voted to leave the EU. And the immediate thing that night, as the numbers were calling in, the highest online search was, what happens when we leave the EU? Which is a little bit late to be doing research on that after the fact.
And the second one was, what is the EU? I'm not kidding.
So people voted literally without knowing at all what could happen afterwards, and are now scrambling with the reality of what they're dealing with. So this is something that is happening across the entire planet. And exactly, it was Bernie. And, you know, just really trying to figure out, okay, now that happens, how do we still make up for it? Because you got to stay vigilant. Just because you vote the one time doesn't mean that it's perfect forever or that it's broken forever. There's always still an opportunity to come back out afterwards. So, you know, I know you want to.
I'll just say one more thing, and that is pay attention, but the thing that is the fire in your belly, whatever that issue is, take that issue and run with it, because that will give you fuel, that will give you strength. If you try to be an activist that's a generalist, it's really hard and you feel really defeated.
Yeah.
So again, learn about the people and support the people whose passions are in all these other places, and then drive 110% on the thing that keeps you going, because you will be inspiring, you will make change, and if you do that and you tell other people to do that, then you will see a machine of people doing their best work, and you'll be part of it.
I would like to say, kind of contrary in a way to what you're saying, but I am kind of a person who gets consumed with everything, and you know, and so to that call of action, I think that ownership, right, is an important thing, right? Like we don't own Google, we don't own Twitter, and but what I just want to speak to my project that is in response to this desire to affect everything and to give voice and empower, all of us who are out here to make a difference. And I've talked, last time I was on My Peoples on episode 5, I talked about Ubuntu and Ubuntu time. And Ubuntu is a principle that says there is no me without you, right? That a person is a person because of other people. And I used to go cry to sleep, like you're saying, because I was so overwhelmed. There's so much to do, and how do I find my way? Like, how do we address all of these things? And I developed a project which I've been working on for a couple of years, which is called Ubuntu Nation, which is the building of a global community that helps people find each other based on the issues that matter to them, and also to be able to communicate about those issues so that every person will have their own media channel, everybody would be able to share, and educate each other about the issues. You'd be able to find information that other people have shared based on those issues, and it would be something that's owned by us. And there are very significant limits for how people can contribute. Financially, there's minimal. No one can contribute more than $10 a month, for example, but generally, no one has to contribute anything to be a part of it, and any finances that come in support the project, but also support our ability to make the world better. And so that's about ownership, and about, activating and amplifying the work that we're all out here doing, because I believe personally that the world can be exactly that beautiful, wonderful place that we dream about. I think that is absolutely and completely possible, and we just need to pull ourselves together in order to make that happen. We have to believe in it, and we have to be determined to make sure we constantly, and we talked about this before, we constantly think about, doing our part, and then what we hand over to the next generation, and then they do their part, and they hand it over to the next generation. It's time for us to be determined that it's all going to happen while we're here, that we're going to see it. We're going to see it. We're going to witness the transformation of the world, and we're going to witness the eradication of poverty. We're going to witness the eradication of injustice. We have to take ownership of it and be sure that what we pass on is the better world that has been possible for so many generations.
But I think what I love is you're dedicated to building the platform, right?
Right.
So that's your thing.
Right. That's my thing.
And that's what I meant by that. Like,
Right.
you've said, I've got this platform to bring all these people in, and you have boundless energy building the platform, right?
Right.
Yes!
Yes.
Good! We're saying the same thing. That makes me happy.
Lee's gonna say, I've already done that. My show is called Redacted Tonight with Lee Camp, so.
Everybody check out Redacted Tonight.
Well, that's his call to action. We're going to have one final show performance as we close up My Peoples. Please welcome Angelica Ra to the stage.
Woo!
Hello.
There you go.
I have to say that couldn't have been a better introduction to what this song that I'm about to play is about. I'm a hybrid kid. My dad's first generation. I grew up sort of in that bilingual, bicultural sphere, kind of confused by all the need to sort of isolate and categorize. And for me, music has been my way of connecting to other people, of breaking down borders. We look for borders, we look for categories. And to me, this has been such a passion to me because I've been able to connect and create family with people that didn't speak the same language and didn't come from the same country. And so I just wanted to share a little bit of this song. It's called Pa'lante, it's in Spanish. And it's a word that means forward, like you said, coming together, moving forward. We all have to come together if we want to make anything happen. And so I want to encourage you guys to do the same with this one. So enjoy. This is Pa'lante. I might have you help me with the chorus, so get ready. Hey, ooh, ooh, Venga, vamos pa'lante. Deja
Prepara la maleta, vamos a hacer camino. Tira paso a paso rumbo a tu destino. Sígueme y déjate llevar. Es hora de volver a empezar. Ey. Si tropiezas no le pongas tanta mente. Sigue caminando, eso es suficiente. Ahora no es momento de parar ni de dudar. Venga, vamos pa'lante, siempre pa'lante. Pa'lante y nunca para atrás. Vamos pa'lante, siempre pa'lante. Pa'lante y nunca para atrás, para atrás. Nunca para atrás, para atrás. Nunca para atrás, para atrás. Nunca para atrás, eso mismo, venga. Y si tú quieres voy contigo de la mano. Escucha bien lo que te digo, no es en vano. Dale sentido a tus 5 sentidos. Suéltate, venga, no es mucho lo que pido. Que no te importe lo que dice tú a la gente, porque al final todos pensamos diferente. No tengas miedo de subir la escalera. Suéltate, venga, prende esa vela. Pa'lante, siempre pa'lante. Pa'lante, nunca para atrás. Vamos pa'lante, siempre pa'lante. Pa'lante, nunca para atrás, para atrás. Nunca para atrás, para atrás. Nunca para atrás, para atrás. Nunca para atrás, para atrás, para atrás. Niña, ¿a dónde va? ¿A dónde va? Dime. Pa'lante, pa'lante, nunca para atrás. ¿A dónde va? ¿A dónde va? Pa'lante, pa'lante y nunca para atrás. Nunca para atrás, para atrás. Nunca para atrás, para atrás. Vamos pa'lante, siempre pa'lante. Vamos pa'lante y nunca para atrás, no.
Muchas gracias. Thank you guys. And thank you all for having me.
So, that is it for our special My Peoples here at Politicon. I just want to say a big shout out to Erica, who's in New York, who has been our host for the past season. Girl, this is harder than it looks. Thanks for letting me do this, being the guest host today. Thank you so much to our guests.
Give it up for Rosario Dawson.
Love you so much. I tried to convince him to do it, he wouldn't. Thank you, my peoples, and please, call to action for me is to please research and question. Do not believe what they're doing. Get involved, get active. Know your stuff. Thank you very much.